You wake up. You check your phone. You scroll through faces, opinions, noise. You think you're making choices. But every swipe, every hesitation, every feeling you ignore is part of a pattern that began years ago. Not yesterday, not last year, but in the darkest corners of your past. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not just your anger, not just your trauma, not just your darkness, but everything about you that you didn't allow yourself to become. Because someone once told you, that's not acceptable. That's too much. That's not you. So you locked it away. Your chaos, your craving to be seen, your defiance, your truth. You buried it, thinking it was gone. But the shadow doesn't die. It hides. And worse, it waits. It waits for you to react without thinking, to get jealous without understanding, to sabotage something beautiful before it can bloom. It speaks in the voice of your sarcasm. It hides in your "I don't care." It's there in your need to control, your need to escape, your need to be needed. And the scary part is, you think you're in control. But the one making those choices is the part of you you've never faced. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that. How many times have you told yourself, this always happens to me? Why do I keep ending up here? Why do I attract the same kind of people? That's not fate. That's not coincidence. That's your shadow, calling the shots from behind the curtain. Because your conscious mind is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it is a vast ocean of unresolved emotions, unmet needs, and buried identities. You were taught to be good, to behave, to be polite, to be nice even when you're angry, to say it's okay when your soul was screaming, no, it's not. Every time you betrayed yourself to be loved, you fed the shadow. And what happens when we ignore something for too long? It fights to be seen. That's why your shadow shows up in your dreams, as monsters, as falling, as someone chasing you. Not because you're weak, but because your mind is begging you to notice what you've rejected. It shows up in your relationships, in how quickly you judge others, in how afraid you are of intimacy, in the way you keep choosing the same kind of person, even when it hurts. Because your shadow is loyal. It wants you to stay in the familiar, even if that familiar is pain. You're not addicted to chaos. You're addicted to the comfort of old wounds. Let's be honest. Facing your shadow is terrifying. It means admitting that the person you pretend to be isn't the full story. It means letting go of your need to always be the strong one, the smart one, the nice one. It means asking, who am I, when no one is watching? And that question, it can break you. But Jung never said it would be easy. He said it would be worth it. Because your shadow isn't just your pain. It's also your power. It holds your forgotten creativity, your sensuality, your courage, your rage that could become boundaries, your grief that could become depth, your selfishness that could become self-love. The goal isn't to destroy your shadow. It's to integrate it, to sit across from it and say, I see you. I know where you came from, and I'm not afraid anymore. That's when the shift happens. You stop reacting blindly. You start responding consciously. You stop seeking approval. You start honoring your truth. You stop repeating patterns. You start rewriting your story. You become whole. But here's the twist Jung wanted us to understand. The shadow never disappears. It evolves with you. It grows as you grow. Because life is not about becoming better. It's about becoming real. And realness requires honesty. Even about the parts of you that still feel ugly, shameful, or broken. So if you've ever wondered why you feel stuck, why no matter how much you try to fix your life, you end up in the same place. Maybe the problem isn't outside. Maybe the war is internal. And the only way to win is to stop fighting yourself. So here's the question Jung would ask you today. What part of yourself have you been avoiding the most? Because that is where the shadow lives. And it will keep making decisions for you until you finally turn around and listen. You've spent most of your life becoming a version of yourself that could survive. But survival comes with a price. And the shadow? It's the receipt you've been avoiding. Let's talk about what that actually means. When you were a child, your emotions were raw. You didn't think before you felt. You didn't question whether you were too loud, too sensitive, too curious, too angry. You simply were. But then something happened. Maybe someone laughed when you cried. Maybe you were told boys shouldn't feel fear, or girls shouldn't be angry. Maybe you watched your parents fight and decided that keeping quiet made you safer. So slowly, without even knowing it, you made deals with yourself. If I stay small, they won't leave. If I smile, they won't hit. If I become what they want, maybe I'll be loved. Those silent contracts, they became your personality, not your real one, your performing self. And every part of you that didn't fit that script got locked away. Jung called this the process of shadow formation, when the rejected self gets pushed into the unconscious. So now, as an adult, you walk around with a curated version of yourself, while the rest of you rots in the dark. And here's where things get disturbing. That shadow self, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It leaks. It leaks when you overreact to small things. It leaks when you feel numb in moments that should be joyful. It leaks when you push people away just as they get close. It leaks in sarcasm, in jealousy, in sudden rage, in silence that feels heavy. because you didn't destroy those parts. You just disowned them. So now your inner child, angry, confused, abandoned, is still running the show. And you call it adulting. Let's go deeper. You ever wonder why some people trigger you instantly? Why someone's confidence feels like arrogance to you? Why someone's vulnerability makes you roll your eyes? Why someone being carefree makes you resentful? It's because they're showing you a part of yourself you buried. It's not about them. It's about you. Jung called this projection. You see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. If you hate arrogant people, maybe you're terrified of being seen. If you can't stand needy people, maybe your own needs were never met. If emotional people annoy you, maybe you were punished for feeling. What you judge most harshly is usually your own shadow in disguise. This is brutal to admit, because it means that the pain you thought was caused by others might actually be the pain of your own rejection of self. Jung's work forces us to stop blaming, to stop pointing fingers, and to instead ask the one question that matters. What am I refusing to feel? You might be avoiding sadness by becoming the clown, avoiding anger by becoming the caretaker, avoiding fear by becoming the controller, avoiding shame by becoming perfect. But all of that is still shadow work, because performing is exhausting, and sooner or later, the mask slips. The shadow shows up when you're tired, when you're triggered, when you're rejected, when you're drunk, when you're heartbroken, when you think no one is watching. And if you haven't met your shadow by then, it will feel like a total breakdown. You'll wonder, who am I? Why did I do that? Why do I feel so empty? Because the person you've been was just one half of you. The other half, your rage, your truth, your grief, your chaos, has been waiting. And the longer you wait to meet it, the louder it gets. This is why relationships feel impossible sometimes, why love triggers abandonment, why kindness triggers mistrust, why someone truly seeing you feels dangerous. Because your shadow says, if they see the real me, they'll leave. If I speak up, I'll be punished. If I stop controlling, everything will fall apart. But that voice is not yours. It's the voice of trauma, of childhood, of survival. You're not broken. You're fragmented. You've got unspoken agreements inside you. Conflicting voices. One says, be strong. Another says, please let me rest. One says, be nice. Another screams, say what you really feel. One says, don't cry. Another whispers, I'm not okay. And until you listen to the whole choir, you'll feel torn, exhausted, unclear. This is what Jung meant when he said, wholeness, not perfection. Wholeness means you are allowed to be all of it, not just the light, not just the curated, but the chaos too. So how do you begin to integrate your shadow? It starts with radical honesty. When you feel triggered, pause, ask, what is this really about? What need is being exposed right now? Whose rule am I following that isn't mine? It means taking responsibility, not for what happened to you, but for how you've let it shape you. It means forgiveness, not for others, but for the parts of yourself you've hated for so long. The part that lashes out, the part that gives in, the part that still feels 8 years old and terrified. Forgive them. Then listen. Ask your shadow, what have you been trying to tell me? You'll be surprised how clear the answers are when you finally stop running from yourself. Because deep inside, you don't want to keep pretending. You don't want to keep wearing a smile while you're screaming internally. You don't want to keep chasing approval for a version of yourself you don't even like. You want realness. You want peace. You want to come home to yourself. And that's what shadow work is. It's not about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering what's been exiled. It's not a one-time thing. It's a lifelong journey. One layer at a time. One trigger at a time. One honest breath at a time. Because when you finally stop running, you don't just meet the shadow. You meet yourself. You've met your shadow. You've seen how it hides behind your reactions, your silence, your perfection. You now understand it was never the enemy. It was the exiled you, the you that learned to disappear in order to be loved. But now comes the hardest part. Not running, not hiding, not fighting, but integrating. Integration is not a moment. It's a decision you make daily to stop abandoning yourself. It begins in the tiny pauses, that split second before you say, I'm fine. That moment before you blame someone else, that breath before you numb out on your phone or food or fake positivity. Ask yourself, what is this part of me trying to protect? Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you've faced it. Now, you start the work of owning it. Your anger? It's not bad. It may be the fire you needed to protect yourself. Your jealousy? It may be pointing toward a life you secretly desire. Your numbness? A defense built over years of not being heard. Your selfishness? Maybe it's the seed of long-neglected self-worth. Every shadow trait is a misunderstood need. It's a distorted signal. Not evil, just misdirected. But here's where most people get stuck. They either drown in the shadow, using it as an excuse. This is just how I am, they say. Or they go back to denying it, hiding behind spiritual bypassing, toxic positivity, or healing trends that avoid the real work. True individuation, the process of becoming whole, is painful because it asks you to let go of your identity. And identities, they're addictive. You've spent years being the nice one, or the strong one, or the responsible one, or the rebel, or the victim. But what if that's not who you truly are? What if that was just who you needed to be? Can you risk becoming someone new? This is the psychological death Jung warned about. The ego doesn't die quietly. It screams. It clings. It makes you question everything. Who am I? If I'm not this? And in that moment, when everything feels like it's crumbling, you're actually being reborn. That collapse, that confusion, it's the cracking of your inner armor. The armor that kept the world out, but also kept you in. The more you integrate, the more you'll feel unfamiliar. You'll laugh differently, speak differently, maybe even lose people who only knew the mask. But what you gain is peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from silence, but from authenticity. You'll stop apologizing for your truth. Stop shrinking for comfort. Stop pretending to be okay just to make others feel better. And slowly, the shadow transforms. It becomes your compass. Your creativity awakens. Your voice deepens. Your relationships shift. You stop attracting the same painful patterns because you've finally changed the source. But here's the raw truth Jung left us with. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This journey isn't glamorous. It's not always Instagram-worthy. Sometimes it looks like crying in your car, setting boundaries that make you feel like the villain, sitting alone on a Saturday night because your new standards don't tolerate old toxicity. But those moments, they're sacred. They're signs that you're no longer making decisions from fear, but from alignment. The shadow no longer controls you. It informs you. You feel jealousy? You listen. You explore. You grow. You feel rage? You honor it. You express it without harm. You learn from it. You feel sadness. You let it move through you, without judgment, without shame. This is emotional maturity. This is inner adulthood. This is individuation. And it changes everything. You begin to love differently, because you're no longer loving from emptiness, but from awareness. You begin to work differently, not to prove, but to express. You begin to walk through the world with quiet power, not because you've eliminated your shadow, but because you've befriended it. And now, Mawa, here's the question I'll leave you with. Not just to think about, but to feel.